welcome to Glitch Please, the show where we talk about video games every week. I'm Ashley.
I'm Adam.
I'm Brian.
And I'm Rags. Hey everybody, I'm back to making videos. I'm in a new place. I got all my stuff. I got my internet set up. I got my furniture, doggy door. The dog is at his desk and all is right with the world. Sorry to keep everybody waiting, but I want to fill you in on just a couple things before we get to the response, because the no did another stupid. I went ahead and I made another Twitter account, which you can follow here, at @rags_YT. If you want to keep up with me in between videos and projects, then that would be the place to do it. I'll also direct your attention to this channel, Dog Bites. I'll be using this as my secondary channel to upload more easygoing, casual kind of stuff, more off-the-cuff responses to articles and videos that maybe I haven't decided are really worth my full time and attention to make for this channel. On Dog Bites, I will also be hosting live streams with my patrons. Haven't decided on a schedule yet. I imagine it'll be about once a week, Saturday, Sunday, something like that. We'll just shoot the shit together. You can always reach me, even if you don't support me on Patreon, but this will just be special time for special people. One last thing before we get to the video, though I think you'll like this one. I was recently contacted by Massdrop, and they wanted me to take a look at the AKG K7XX audiophile headphones. I'll give you my thoughts later in this video, but spoiler alert, I really like them. They're very good. So, now that we are caught up, finally, let us unpack the No's latest bit of verbal diarrhea.
The other big thing that happened this week, and this is going to be quite a discussion, I suspect, is there has been a major firing at ArenaNet.
Yep, we're doing it. We're talking about that Jessica Price nonsense. And don't worry if you're not quite caught up to speed. All will be made clear. I promise you that.
Two Guild Wars 2 writers were very publicly fired from the company after an online altercation with fans. And so there's a lot of complexity to this.
Actually, I wouldn't say it's very complex at all. In fact, I think this is a really clear-cut, simple case. In fact, I think somebody would have to go out of their way to try and obfuscate what happened in order to justify coming up with a reason or an excuse as to why it was bad that it happened at all.
It's so far pretty, people are polarizing to one of two directions, but there's actually a lot of shades of gray in here that are worth discussing.
And truly, if ever there was a group of people on the internet, if ever there was a bunch of game journalists that I could trust to take a fair and balanced and nuanced approach to issues like these, it would be the No. After all, you handle yourself so well in previous circumstances. The video we're watching now about whether Twitter can get you fired has more dislikes than likes. Quite an impressive accomplishment. Talking about the politics in the Division 2, that wasn't very well received either, going by what the most popular comments are on the page. When you called the developers of Kingdom Come Deliverance racist, I did a video on that. You were raked over the coals for that nonsense. You managed to get more dislikes than likes when you sat down with the design director of Battlefield 5 to talk about history versus entertainment. I can't help but notice that there's a pattern developing here. Whenever you tread into the realm of politics or social issues, your biases come out, and they're not exactly subtle. And people aren't buying that shit. I mean, a part of me is glad that you're sticking up for what you think and believe in, sure, but eventually I'm wondering if you're ever going to really take all this criticism and negative feedback you consistently get to heart. Or, don't, and keep giving me free content, I suppose.
Bear with us. It's something that I'm worried to talk about because it brings gender into it.
Now, I know I'm some evil, nasty, woman-hating gamer-gator, but it sounds to me like you're not very confident in your own opinions regarding gender. And remember, it wasn't us who brought gender into the equation. You'll have to thank Jessica for that.
And that's its own whole can of worms for anyone and everyone, but...
Well, not for me. This doggo knows his stuff when it comes to gender issues. I'm confident in my ability to articulate what my position is. I don't think it's a can of worms at all. In fact, I look forward to it immensely. as a lot of you might not be quite caught up with where our story begins, Ashley's gonna fill us in.
Here is essentially what happened. The top line is that one of the Guild Wars 2 writers, Jessica Price, she put out a tweet, as a series of tweets discussing the complexity of creating compelling characters in an MMO environment, because you don't have access to the same types of tools that you would in a narrative game, where you just make choices for characters and this makes them a compelling protagonist. MMOs are different because each player feels this sense of ownership over their character and has their own idea of what this character should be and what should make them compelling, and so you can't insert too much into their character, but you also don't want to leave them just like as a piece of like blank white bread that goes through the world without having any sort of impact or dynamics.
Yeah.
Sort of. So there's a different complexity to that, and so she put out a thread just discussing how it's complex and
Well, let's take it from there. On July the 3rd, Jessica Price sent out this tweet. Since I spent all kinds of time saying it on a Reddit AMA, and I haven't talked about actual game dev on Twitter in a while, here's a thread about writing for the PC character in an MMO. She then proceeds to make a lot of tweets about game development in that aspect, writing characters that the player can insert themselves into in an MMO. She talks about dialogue, personality, choices, etc., etc. Nothing strange or unusual about it in any way. That is, until Duror came along.
And a YouTuber who is very big into Guild Wars, very popular with the Guild Wars 2 community. In fact, I believe is also an NPC in the game.
Absolutely. In the Fractals of the Mists on the Mistlock Observatory, Duror is a merchant who sells account augmentations, named after Duror, YouTuber and Twitch streamer for Guild Wars 2.
Durar or
Duror?
Royer, yeah.
I'm not great on the pronunciation. Apologize if we got it wrong.
Wow.
I've only seen it written out. He responded and was like, I can see that. I disagree. I wonder if branching narratives would or not just branching narratives, but like if you can choose your dialogue options, if that would do something like that.
Do we have like the actual tweet? Because I'm pretty sure I think the verbiage and the wording is important, because I don't think it was like actually inflammatory. I think it was very. I think it was level-headed in a way.
And very level-headed it was indeed. Duror said, "Really interesting thread to read." White supremacist sign. However, allow me to disagree slightly. I don't believe the issue lies in the MMORPG genre itself, as your wording seemingly suggests. I believe the issue lies in the constraints of the living story's narrative design. When you want the outcome to be the same across the board for all players' experiences, then yes, by design you are extremely limited in how you can construct the personality of the PC, the player character. But if instead players were given the option to meaningfully express their character through branching dialogue options, which also aren't just on the checklist for an achievement that forces you through all dialogue options, then perhaps players would be more invested in the role-playing aspect of that particular MMORPG. Nonetheless, I appreciate the insightful thread. Now, how anybody could read those responses to what Jessica Price said and get the vibe that they were disrespectful, or overly critical, or mean, or harassing, or in any way negative is beyond me. I can't fathom being able to read those and seeing these with a negative connotation.
This is where, I do have this. So
And this is very important.
It's just, sorry, it takes me a little bit to get to it because there's a whole lot of tweets.
So there's a little bit of it here.
Yeah, good job being prepared, Ashley, for the discussion. It's probably an important bit of information to have on hand. We're going to talk about some people being fired over tweets. Do we have the tweets? Oh, I'm sure they're around here somewhere. I'm sure I can find them. I didn't think that they might be important before we started.
The three-part tweet, but it says, interesting thread to read. However, let me disagree slightly. I don't believe the issue lies in the MMORPG genre itself, as your wording seems to suggest. I believe the issue lies in the constraints of the living story's narrative design. So he's whoever this person is, he or she, I don't know, is approaching it from, he's trying to just give his point of view, and he's not doing it in an inflammatory way.
Correct. These tweets are not inflammatory in any way. A strange bit of elucidation coming from the same person who said that Warhorse Studios was racist because they didn't have black people in a historical game about 1403 Bohemia. He reads out the tweets, and I've already done that, and my voice is far, far more soothing and handsome and sensual. So we'll skip this bit.
Nonetheless, I appreciate the insightful thread. So he's basically saying, I disagree, and here's why. And he's not saying you're fucking wrong and you're an idiot for thinking this way, my way is the right way. I think he's just giving an opinion. And he or she might be implying that I know what I'm talking about more than someone else or whatever, but I don't think they're intentionally being like a dick. I think they're just trying to say something.
In no way was he implying that he knew more than Jessica, and I don't know exactly why you brought up that he might be doing that from these tweets. I mean, he's clearly not saying that. But I agree with your general idea. He was just giving his opinion.
Sure.
And that's important.
And I agree with Gimli. I think this is a very important point that a lot of developers need to consistently remember. Any content creator should consistently remember. The audience is not looking at some sort of a created work from the same point of view as the person who created it. They don't have the same kind of connection to it. And it's important that if you want good critical feedback, that you get people's opinions on it and you take them to heart. That doesn't mean you have to agree with all of them or you have to change on a whim all the time, but it is good for the project. And if you listen to people, then you might be able to learn a great deal about how to make your project better, be it a game or a movie or a video or anything else. Unfortunately, we live in an industry where giving feedback is often confused with harassment or in mala fides criticism. This article on digitallydownloaded.net says game developers need to stop listening to fans by Matt S. And fans is in quotations, which reminds me of what I Hate Everything said about how fans are supposed to see the good in things. It's a terrible attitude to have, one that I vehemently disagree with. A woman on the front lines of the British Army with a prosthetic arm in a World War II game? Well, if you have a problem with that, then you're not really a fan of Battlefield. It seems that increasingly we see this attitude that if you have anything critical to say about anything, then you're not really a fan. You're just there to throw shade. You're just there to hate. You're just there because you hate women, etc., etc. In come the accusations and the labeling.
And there's tons of screenshots going around about the different dialogues, because what ended up happening is she retweeted him, she quote tweeted him, and was like, here's welcome to being a woman in game development, getting mansplained to.
Yeah, she was a total fucking bitch to him for absolutely no reason, looking to score victimhood points because I have a vagina. Which means that if anybody disagrees with me, it's because they must be a sexist pig and I'm being mansplained to, and people should come to my defense. She gets criticized on the internet, and only in the most lightest, most innocuous way possible. And the first thing she does is she pulls the gender card. She has to make this about being a woman. I mean, if only she was a man, because we all know that men never get criticized or corrected on the internet. It's a phenomenon exclusive to women. But you know what isn't exclusive to women? The chance to have some really good headphones. Consider that your segue, ladies and gentlemen. Recently, Massdrop contacted me and wanted me to take a look at a pair of headphones that they were selling on their site, Massdrop. And so they sent me a pair and told me to give my honest impressions, which I intend to do now. And I'm very happy to say that these headphones were very, very impressive, and I really enjoyed using them. In fact, I used them for weeks and weeks, and I never felt the need to go back to my old faithful default pair, a pair of ATH-AG1Xs. These K7XX headphones, though, they are open back, which means that they give you a much more, open, ambient, roomy kind of sound in your ears, as opposed to closed back headsets, which are a lot more closed and condensed and centralized to your ear space. Up until I used these headphones, I really wasn't a fan of the open backs that I had used before, but I was pleasantly surprised to find that these open backs were really nice. I like the open kind of quality that the sound had. They were legitimately very interesting. They felt different. The sounds felt not worse, not better, just different. And I think it's going to be up to just personal preference as to which one that you like over the other. I use these headphones almost entirely for gaming, but I also listen to a lot of music as I was doing so. And if you are a big gamer and you're looking for a pair of headsets that will give you really good sound quality, but also will not compromise on your ability to listen, especially to directional cues in games, then I'm happy to say that you won't have any problem if you get these. While I was playing games like Dirty Bomb, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, Battlefield, things of that nature, I was able to tell the direction that sounds were coming from, and I was able to enjoy a really good quality on the noise that came from rifle reports, engines running, tanks rumbling by, beeps and boops of equipment, and other ambient noises of the environment. So much so that I will probably be using these as an alternative to my main set of headphones because they give a different but equally pleasant kind of sound. And as far as comfort on these headsets go, I really like how they feel on my face. I could wear these for hours and hours and hours on end and they never got uncomfortable. They were very easy to adjust on the rare times I needed to scoot them around. They didn't slip off my furry face. They didn't rub uncomfortably against my earlobes. All in all, using them was a very pleasant experience, and I really enjoyed using them, and I will continue to enjoy using them for Lord knows how long to come. So if you are considering a pair of headphones that you want to use into the future for gaming and for listening to music, then I would give my personal recommendation for the K7XXs. Very glad to see that this is a product that I could recommend to people. Again, I'm not an audiophile. I don't know a lot about the technical aspects of wavelengths and sound wave this. I just don't know much about it. All I can tell you is what the end result was, and the end result was a very pleasing set of headphones that I really enjoyed using. Check out some other reviews from more technical-sided YouTubers, if you wish. But again, if you're looking for a good set of headphones, these are around $200 on their site, and from what I used, I would be confident in buying this pair if I ever had a catastrophic accident where my headphones both broke. I would be legitimately confident in buying this as a pair based on how well they've performed for me so far. Again, there's a link in the description to the Massdrop site that leads you to these headphones. If you want to give them a look, take a gander at the reviews over there as well. But I think you'll be very pleased if you decide to pick them up. So with all of that out of the way, let's get back to something that's a little less pleasant on our ears.
People who don't know your job telling you how to do your job.
Well, I have a
But before that,
yeah.
I think there was an escalation that happened directly between the two of them that is not as widely seen.
Sure.
She did respond directly to him, basically being like, thanks for trying to tell me what we do internally, my dude.
Indeed, after Doror's extremely polite comments that he gave in response to her, even with ending on the words, "Nonetheless, I appreciate the insightful thread," Jessica Price responded by saying, "Thanks for trying to tell me what we do internally, my dude." What a fucking bitch! Somebody has a chip on their shoulder, and they're trying to take it out on anybody else that they can.
And, which seems like a little exasperated.
Yeah, no fucking shit.
But his response was also an escalation, so I don't think he's
what was
innocent of
his
the
response?
escalation.
Sure.
Oh yeah, Ashley, tell us. I want to know. Tell us, Ashley, how did Doror escalate the situation? I would love to know. I would love to get your justification as to why you think that. I am all ears. Well, actually, I'm all ass and sass, but I'm also all ears. Both of these big, fluffy ears are yours. I am lubed up and ready, Ashley. Hit me with your best shot.
He had that thread. She responded, "Thanks for trying to tell me what we do internally, my dude."
Yeah, Ashley, Jessica was the one who escalated things. Pulling the woman card and, being a cunt.
And he said, you getting mad at my obvious attempt at creating dialogue and discussion with you instead of just replying that I'm wrong or otherwise correct me in my false assumptions is just disheartening for me. You do you, though. I'm sorry if it offended. I'll leave you to it. But
Oh yeah, you better throw in a big butt there, Ashley. And I don't want to toot my own horn here, but I consider myself somewhat of an expert on big butts. So I'll know a good one when I see one. I've sniffed a lot of butts in my life, Ashley, so let's see if this one here passes the proverbial smell test. I want to see you reach to try and make what Durar said to her come out as an escalation. I want to see just how you do it, because you can't, but I want to see you try. I want to see you sit there and I want to watch your mind squirm a bit to try and find a way to turn this into a two-sided issue.
I
think that's him reading anger.
Sure.
But I don't know about you. I don't read that tweet as angry, just sort of like exasperated.
Ashley, that's what exasperated means. You're saying words and you don't know what they mean. Exasperated means irritated intensely or infuriated. It didn't come off as mad. It came off as exasperated. That makes it worse. I mean, what you said, it makes your case look even worse than it already is. I mean, it's already terrible. Your argument is terrible. Now it's terribler, right? It's terribler. It has become so much more terrible. It's just a haze of awfulness. I'm here to make your argument look stupid. I don't need your help, Ashley. Let me do the work for you, please.
Which
yeah,
I get the feeling
I think her response was just a little. It's dismissive. It's like, yeah, you don't know. You don't know what you're talking about. It's basically what that's saying.
I think that is the most charitable interpretation of what Jessica Price said that could be made, and I don't buy it because then she goes on to quote tweet Durar right after that with what is definitely a condescending, douchey comment. Because these tweets were made on July the 4th, 2 minutes after her initial comment to Durar. She comes back and says, "Today in being a female game dev, allow me, a person who does not work with you, explain to you how you do your job." This was the attitude that she had. The attitude was, I need to take offense to this, I need to make myself the victim, and I need to play the woman card. Because there are enough people out there, like you idiots at the Know, and like all sorts of social justice warriors and games journalists and all sorts of publications across the internet who will rush quickly without a second's worth of hesitation or critical thinking to come to the defense of Milady. Somebody politely disagreed with a woman on the internet today. What can we do to score her some of those sweet, sweet victim points? Cash in those sweet oppression credits down at the Social Justice Bank. They'll come in handy later.
Yes.
And
it is, but it doesn't sound
it's not
angry.
It's not mean.
So
it's just
I don't
like
think he's innocent of the escalation here.
No, I don't think so either. But
this attitude encapsulates so well why these videos get so many dislikes on a channel of this size. It's like you are living on a completely different planet from the average person, from the normal human being, who doesn't have to see everything through the lens of gender or oppression or intersectionality. In your mind, someone can't just disagree with somebody else and offer respectful criticism. It doesn't exist in your mind. It has to be because of some form of oppression, or because someone is being taken advantage of, or because there's marginalization in our society, or yada yada yada. Let's take a look. Again, let's reread this tweet. Let's reread the tweet that you guys are saying is Durar escalating the situation. Durar says, "You getting mad at my obvious attempt at creating dialogue and discussion with you, instead of just replying that I'm wrong or otherwise correct me in my false assumptions, is really just disheartening for me. You do you, though. I'm sorry if it offended. I'll leave you to it." Adam, Ashley, I cannot fathom the kind of mental gymnastics one must somersault themselves through in order to take a look at this tweet that ends with him saying, "I'm sorry if it offended you, and I will leave you to it," and say that this is an escalation. I mean, I think he was being a little bit too soft on her myself. I think he should have been more assertive and he should have defended himself a bit more and said, there's no reason for you to do that. That's completely uncalled for. Let's have a discussion about this. But I think that one of the reasons that he wasn't more assertive, and I could be wrong here. I could be wrong. But Duror has been on streams where he has addressed Jessica Price in the past. Let's listen to what he thinks of Jessica Price. And maybe that'll help elucidate where exactly he's coming from here and why he didn't want to escalate the situation.
I said this on Tea Time as well, on Sunday. I genuinely believe that the reason why, like, this was the perfect time to kill him off, because we needed something more. I love Jessica Price's responses. She is like the god of fucking AMAs. Like, she just gives great answers all the way through. It's absolutely amazing to read through. But at one point she was like, she just explained, this is why we did it, this is how we did it.
You know, if I was Jessica Price and I had seen this and I knew just what he thought of me, I would feel like a piece of shit if I had behaved that way towards him for no reason at all. There have been times when maybe I'd been a little short with people randomly out of the blue. Nothing like this, but sometimes I kind of got the vibe that I replied to somebody who messaged me in a somewhat dismissive tone or something along those lines. Whether I had or not, sometimes I felt that way. And as a result, it made me feel terrible. How would you feel if you had gone up to somebody that you admired this much, and that you had looked up to this much, and they treated you with this level of disdain and contempt, and then not only said that to you, but then went out to quote tweet to all of these other people just how little they thought of you, and how malicious they thought your intentions were, when all you wanted was to have a chat? I mean, wow. It takes a special kind of asshole. And I don't mean the one I've got, but a special kind of asshole to behave like this and then go on for weeks afterwards talking about how you're the victim. I mean, to this day, if you go to Jessica Price's Twitter, right under her bio it says, fired from ArenaNet in Paizo for refusal to act like I'm men's property. That's how deranged this woman is. That's how much of a lunatic she is. Wait, what's that? Somebody disagreed with me politely? Well, they must hate women.
I think that her response is basically saying, you don't know what you're talking about. And I think his is maybe playing a little victim-y of saying, like, you're treating me disrespectfully or whatever. But it's like, whatever.
Wow, just the mental gymnastics it takes to do this. I can't imagine. So, Adam, victimhood is a concept that's often overplayed in terms of especially social justice and the leftist ideology as a method to gain power. They've effectively weaponized victimhood. People use intersectionality to, essentially compete for oppression. Not all victimhood is equal. It's definitely on a spectrum. If somebody calls me an asshole, then I'm a victim of being called an asshole. If somebody murders me, then I'm a victim of, being murdered. If somebody wants me to fuck them, then they're a victim of this big-ass dickin' they're about to get. So if I was in Duror's place, then yeah, I would feel like a victim in that small degree, because this woman is essentially attacking me for me politely disagreeing with something that she said, and who clearly wanted a discussion and dialogue, because this is obviously something that he cares a great deal about. That doesn't mean that I need to ask for people's sympathies, and I don't need a GoFundMe to pay for therapy or anything like that. But the idea that we can suggest that Duror is the one who's trying to come out as the victim in the scenario is absolutely fucking batshit insane.
But then she does kick the hornet's nest.
She does kick the hornet's nest. She retweets it and does make it very clearly about that she feels that he would not be responding to her this way if she were a male game developer.
Which is like...
And I can't speak entirely to that either way. The problem with gender specific stuff is that I only have my own experience. You only have your own experience, and I don't know if this guy would have responded to a male developer differently. If he would have disagreed with him, maybe he's a maybe would have responded to any developer the
Totally.
same way.
Which is why I don't think it's fair to turn it into a gender issue per se.
Well, holy fucking shit, scratch my balls and call me Carlton. Why, that doesn't... Why did I say that? A moment of clarity from Adam. Everyone mark it down on your calendars. On this day, Adam said something that wasn't retarded. Exactly. There's no reason to turn this into a gender issue for no reason at all. If for no other reason than the fact that sometimes a gender issue might pop up. And if you constantly cry wolf, then nobody's gonna believe you when an actual wolf comes around. Now, as for you, Ashley, I don't think that's a very good way to go about looking at issues like this. Don't think of it as, I only have the perspective of a woman. You only have the perspective of a man. Because it taints everything that you experience as being through that lens when it might not have anything to do with it. Maybe people do things to you because you're a woman. Maybe people do things to Adam because he's a man. Maybe it doesn't matter and they would have done those things anyway. Yeah, sure. I'm a handsome doggo. Who's to say that people wouldn't throw tennis balls and expect for me to acquire them and then return them from whence they came? If I was a person, who knows? I can't say. It's generally not a good idea to attribute everything that happens to a person as being due to some immutable characteristic that they have, their race, their gender, blah, blah, blah. It might be the case. Sure, it might be. But if you don't have any evidence or any reason to assume that it would, then you shouldn't assume it would.
I think it's perfectly valid for her to say like, hey, I've been doing this job for 10 years or however long, and you are just you're a person who plays my games, and you telling me how to do my job, maybe you should realize that you don't come from the same like level of knowledge as I do, and like maybe I have a little more insight to these problems, and maybe your solutions aren't exactly sound.
So we have a name for that, Adam. It's called not an argument. You're not right because you've been doing it longer. You're not right because you have a college degree. Somebody else isn't wrong because they aren't developing the game. Somebody else isn't wrong because they don't have a degree. A lot of people would understand this as an argument from authority, which is a logical fallacy. Basically, person A is an authority on a particular topic, and so when person A says something about that topic, then person A is probably correct. I mean, I guess I would rather Jessica Price engage in a logical fallacy with Doror from a position of good faith than to just be a fucking bitch to him for no reason. So, I mean, yeah, this would be an improvement over what happened, but I still wouldn't suggest that she take this argument. Especially because, as I elucidated on earlier just a little bit, it's very, very good to get the insight of people who just play your game because they don't necessarily have the same connection to it that a developer or a writer for the game would have.
But then turning it into like, you're saying this because I'm a woman, it's not a fair card to pull out in that situation.
Correct.
At least that's the way I feel.
No, I would definitely agree that I think that she's not the only developer who...
I think she's being dev-splained is what's happening.
And I do agree with that. I think there's a lot of armchair developers in the world.
Yeah.
We were all like, how hard can this be really? Or...
Well, Doror's not a developer, so it isn't dev-splaining. I had to look that up. I've never heard that before. But again, Ashley, I think it's really disingenuous for you to assume that Doror is an armchair developer, acting like he has all the answers and he knows everything. He's just offering some criticism, some commentary, and he's not doing that in a way that's overly authoritative. He's not looking down at her. He's not saying that he knows better than anybody else. He's just giving his opinion.
You know, and that happens to anyone about anything. Is, you know, any of us will get responses like, oh, I don't see how hard, you know, I'm sure, why don't you just do this? And it's not necessarily a gender thing. Dev-splain is a great way to put it.
No, it's a terrible way to put it because it doesn't make any sense, Ashley. But is this you saying that it's not necessarily at all a gender thing because it happens to everybody? So there's no reason to bring gender into this?
Yeah, and the thing that, this is really interesting because what happens is she then says, aside from the gender thing, it's like, let me explain, like, allow me to explain how to do your job. I think what made people mad was the developer, or the gender thing, not necessarily the you're telling me how to do my job thing. But then she goes on to bring up the the top tweet is, since we got a lot of hurt man feels today, she's like even further leaning into that gender role thing, which is, I don't know if that's a smart thing to do. And maybe it's just an impassioned thing that she's doing. But like her general response without the gender is just like, I hate when people are telling me how to do my job.
Yeah, which still isn't very cool at all for her to do. This is layers. That's the thing. This is like a delicious cake of how not to engage with other human beings, right? You're assuming their intentions on two different levels. What Jessica's doing on the first level, which is the most obvious one, is playing the gender card when it is completely unnecessary. And it's doing so in a very condescending, snobby kind of way. And then that's on top of the filling of this cake of incompetence, which is, I'm going to treat somebody's honest, good faith criticism and opinion based on a topic that I've brought up as they're trying to tell me that they know everything and I don't know what I'm doing and they know how to do my job better than I do. Imagine if every single developer had this attitude whenever a prominent member of the community who had played a lot of the game, who was intimately familiar with the way the game mechanics work and how the game balance worked. Imagine if every time a player or a player base responded to developers with criticism or with suggestions as to how to improve the game, they had Jessica Price's response.
This is really annoying. Don't fucking do this.
And it's also important to note that Jessica Price did all of this in a public Twitter thread that was addressed at everybody, right? This was a public thing that she put out there. If you, as a game developer, as a game writer, or somebody who works on a product that is consumed by a lot of people, openly talks about how that game is being put together, and you don't expect for some people to offer their criticism, you're just an idiot. I don't know how else to put this. You're either incredibly naive or you're just an idiot. I mean, you're going to social media to talk about a topic. People are going to talk about that topic. There shouldn't be fucking duh.
And it's interesting because as people who are front-facing for the internet, like we've had these experiences where like we'll have people come in, think they understand a scenario better than us, and then tell us why we're stupid or why we didn't do something wrong. And there are times when I'm sure plenty of us have responded in ways that like are pretty similar to this, sans the whole gender issue thing. It's like, hey, listen, maybe you don't know what the whole situation is and you just have a small picture. Like that just happened. And it's like, I don't think ArenaNet's response to this situation was the best.
I think there's more to their response.
Yeah.
I have a theory on it, which I'll get into. But as far as the escalation goes, I agree that she didn't handle it the best.
I think that is being charitable to the point of disingenuousness, Ashley.
After the initial thing, like after basically the first time that she said, made an implication that it was all about gender. Then all of the responses from the community did become gendered. Well,
Right.
not all of them. Not all of them. That's an overgeneralization. But they started to get more gendered.
Yeah.
What? Duh, of course. Of course, Ashley. She's the one. Jessica is the one who made this a gender issue when nobody else was thinking about gender. She's the one who made it the topic of the conversation.
And
And then it sort of went from being about being devsplained to...
And again, I think that's wrong. It's assuming intentions on his part that you have no evidence for. It's also just wrong because Doror is not a dev, so that term just doesn't work.
being just like this polar, like, oh, playing the woman card and so on and so forth.
Right.
And then it devolves from being a potentially productive conversation into just a war as to whether that was okay and whether this woman attacked, this female developer attacked this male member of the community over a misunderstanding.
Right.
And it's
Ashley, your attempt to take away as much culpability from the aggressor in this situation as possible is really, really obvious. The only reason that it became so toxic was because that is the decision that Jessica Price made when she decided that she would respond to Doror in this manner.
And
Like, are you implying that everything a man says to you that you disagree with is mansplaining? Like, that's what the conversation, that's what that sparked.
Yeah, and that's on Jessica.
right,
And that's really dangerous.
Right.
And like, oh, man, like I sympathize with how she's feeling of someone is explaining to me how to do my job.
That's not a very honest assessment of what Durar was saying, though.
But like the way that was handled is not the best.
It's also though like
It's really strange how you guys seem to insist that she just didn't handle it the best. Oh, she could have handled that better, or that wasn't the optimal response. She was being a rude-ass jerk. Don't try to sugarcoat it just so you try to make her look better than she really was.
we can't walk a mile in her shoes either. Like,
Totally.
you know, her like career as a developer, and maybe, you know, maybe it's been a decade of, you know, getting like, I don't know, shitty gendered comments from, you know, fans and stuff. Not saying this was, but like maybe she had just hit a point where she's like,
maybe
fuck,
that's the straw.
fuck you. Yeah.
right.
and then
like
that's-
maybe it
and I
wasn't
don't-
even about this specific
Exactly,
interaction
and I don't
so
know-
much as it had been
right.
about a build-up
Right.
that we didn't see.
I don't
Right.
know that, but maybe, and also,
All right, Brian, let me tell you about being an adult. An adult is able to control their emotions. An adult is able to understand that if I'm frustrated at these people over there, that doesn't give me justification to take out that frustration on some new person that I come across. If I'm having a shitty day and somebody comes up to me wanting just to talk and I say, "Fuck you, asshole," that's not an excuse for my behavior. If you are on social media and you're publicly talking about a game that you're working on, representing a company that you're working for, and you're basically talking to the consumers, you're talking to the customers in front of you, and you pull this shit, if you lash out at them, if you're rude, if you call them sexist, no employer in the world is gonna say, "Oh, that's okay, you just had a tough day." Tough fucking titties. You have to be an adult. The customers who see you operating, in essence, in uniform, don't care about your day. They don't care about how you're feeling. They don't want to be disrespected out of the blue because you aren't mature enough to handle your emotions. I don't care if the 10,000 people ahead of him said nasty things to her. That doesn't give her excuse to behave the way that she did to Duror. Once again, I'm having to explain to games journalists how to adult. If somebody started snarking off to me and then said, "Oh, it was because the people in front of you were being rude to me," my answer would be, "I don't give a fuck." That doesn't mean that you can behave that way towards me when we're just meeting.
this is why I hate how internet back and forths can get so heated so quickly. Whereas I feel like if this was a real life conversation, it would be probably a lot more polite, a lot more understanding, and it wouldn't have amounted to anything. And it sucks that it just sucks by the nature of internet back and forths that
Yeah.
just things just go from 0 to 100.
Yeah.
It's probably true that if they were face to face, she wouldn't have been such a massive cunt. But regardless, that's how she decided to act on the internet. That's how she decided to engage with him, as she has engaged with others since. That's how she behaves, because that is how she chooses to behave.
And then this was a bad example, or a good example of like how a mob mentality can shape
Absolutely.
a response to a situation.
Right.
Is it? In what way do you mean that?
Because while I disagree with her bringing gender into it, I can see her points, and I feel like I've even probably been on the internet and been like, "Hey, don't be a jerk to me," even though I don't think that this guy was necessarily being a jerk.
Right.
Like I've definitely responded publicly in ways that like
Right.
like you
Popped
know
off to somebody.
maybe I don't need to even go there, but I've just been in that situation where, like, dude, I'm having a rough day, just fucking go away.
Right.
You know?
Shortly after her original post, Jessica Price tweeted, "Like the next rando asshat that attempts to explain the concept of branching dialogue to me, as if, having worked in the game narrative for a fucking decade, I have never heard of it, is getting insta-blocked. PSA." Hours later, she even commented to other people asking why he even felt the need to do that. Oh yeah, why did he feel the need to offer his opinion to me? Well, I think the answer is pretty obvious. Because as was pointed out, you're part of the narrative team. May of this year, after the passing of Total Biscuit, she said, "The kindest thing I can say is, I'm glad he's no longer around to keep doing harm. Not even willing to type out his fucking name." Absolutely fucking disgusting to find happiness in the death of a man like Total Biscuit. Absolutely fucking disgusting. Was she having a bad day then too? 'Cause Jessica seems to have a lot of bad days. Let's keep going. Speaking of her ability to be able to take any kind of criticism, she wrote the day before this all blew up, "As an amateur fantasy writer, I would like to tell you, a professional fantasy writer, no, maybe listen to yourself and stop right there, my dude. Because after all, gamer's gonna gamer." Doesn't surprise me in the least that she holds her own consumers in such a low regard. I have no idea why social justice warriors have this predilection towards thinking that gamers are terrible, horrible people, but they want all the power and influence for themselves. I'm pretty sure that drug dealers on the street hold a higher opinion of their own patrons. So many developers and so many games journalists within this industry seem to have a hatred of those involved in being consumers in the industry. No wonder so few people actually trust games journalism these days. I mean, what a toxic attitude for somebody to have, as if an amateur writer doesn't have anything useful or constructive to teach you. Like you couldn't ever learn anything from somebody who isn't a professional fantasy writer like you are. Her Twitter thread, this one here, it's like a parody account. It's like she's running a feminist SJW game developer parody account. It's like she's genetically predisposed to being a rude-ass bitch. I mean, everything that I've seen coming out of her mouth, everything that she has typed so far, screams that she's a terrible person, and that she's rude and obnoxious and holier than thou, and that she's always constantly looking for victim points. So Gimli, please, do tell me, I would love to know, what points did she make that you agree with? What points has she even made? Because you seem to be one of the few people on the planet who look at this exchange that she went through with Deror and think that she was making a point at all instead of deflecting to sexism.
But then this turned into like this whole mob of people. Oh my God. Oh my
What's
God.
up, Joel?
I don't even know where we were.
We were talking about the.
Oh, right.
We've all probably been.
Yeah.
I know.
but then-
I've snapped at people.
Yeah,
I've
it's-
had bad times where it wasn't about that one. It's
Just a
drop
culmination.
in the bucket, and
Jessica Price has a long history. It's practically tradition at this point for her to be extremely rude and standoffish towards anybody who doesn't completely agree with really everything that she ever says. This isn't a one-time thing for her. Trying to pass this off as if it is a one-time thing for her is dishonest. Though to be honest, that's sort of what I've come to expect from Glitch Please.
sometimes it's just like that. It shouldn't be like this one shouldn't have done anything, but I was over it because I had heard something similar a billion times.
Totally.
Again, this is not an excuse, especially not one for an adult who's essentially working in uniform. No company would ever let somebody publicly act this way and be so vitriolic and hateful and standoffish towards their consumers over and over and over again without eventually saying that you're hurting the image and you're really making us look bad.
And you know, I do this occasionally I get frustrated just in like within the no, like we have overall like a really great community and like lots of like great commenters and people who
Oh, I agree, Ashley. 100%. I think your comments are great. In fact, let's go to the comment section of this video and see what the viewers at home are thinking. Fired for creating a PR nightmare for the company you represent. His response was also an escalation. Ashley reads his response in an angry tone. I think that's him reading anger. Exploiting real gender issues to be horrible without consequence. Simple. Supported by games media because of lack of objectivity. Simple. How about fired for attacking and insulting the community? Can game media just be honest and admit this woman was 100% in the wrong here? The guy was respectfully disagreeing, and she pulled out the I'm a woman, he's mansplaining card out of nowhere. This woman also has a history of being extremely controversial, especially with how disrespectful she was about Total Biscuit's death. For fuck's sake, just be honest for once and quit trying to defend her. A member of the community tried to open a dialogue with someone he looks up to and got absolutely destroyed by her. I have no hurt feelings of her being fired, especially after her inflammatory tweets about John Bain dying. She played the victim complex for acting like an ass. She's also one of the few devs out there that tweeted she was happy that Total Biscuit died, so that also tells you what kind of person she is. She was glad Total Biscuit died, publicly. I'm glad she was fired. Honestly, I'm kinda disgusted by anybody supporting her at this point. On the Guild Wars 2 debacle, it's not the fact that they were just tweeting. It's the fact that they attacked one of their fans who responded to a post about the game with unrelated, bigoted remarks. She was wrong, and her coworker shouldn't have backed her in public. I can't believe you guys are trying to justify Jessica's whole shenanigan where there is no excuse for what she did. I agree 100%, Ashley. You do have some good commenters.
And then every now and again, you'll see a comment like, does this chick even play video games, or
Right.
did they just hire a pair of tits to read a prompter?
Right.
And I'm like, I know that this person doesn't, they're not a subscriber, they don't watch the show.
Right.
If they did,
Right.
they would know better.
Right.
But they don't.
Yeah, that would be a dumb comment. Just ignore it.
And, so there's just these little
And it-
frustrations
Yeah.
that you write off, but they add up, and then eventually something can
Yes.
just,
Yeah.
you're having, maybe a bad day already, and someone's just like sets you off, and you're like, look,
Right.
I'm at it.
That might be years of shit built up. you know.
And
They tend to try and make this point one of their strong positions on this issue, so I'm just going to stop addressing it in the future because I think I've already given it enough explanation as it is. But one last time, just for old time's sake, between you and me. Ashley, Jessica Price is an adult, and she needs to operate with a level of maturity and emotional control. It is no excuse that you snap at one person unrelated to other things that are happening in your life, especially when you're essentially wearing the proverbial uniform of a company who has to think about its image and how it treats its consumers. She's an adult. Treat her like an adult. She has no excuse.
but what this led to was like this mob
This-
of people saying she's sexist. She's trying to make an example of someone that doesn't deserve to be made an example of. She's bringing gender into what should have been a polite discourse. And I'm just saying what this argument had become.
Yeah.
And then ArenaNet was like, immediately was like, you're out of here.
Yeah, I do think that they made the right call here, and I'm pretty slow to call for people to be fired. I'm definitely one to err on the side of let people keep their jobs, but in a situation like this that is so obviously black and white with how she's treating people and how the community reacted to the way that she was behaving towards public members of the community, like Deror, for instance, as a partner with ArenaNet, I think that there couldn't have really been another way for this to go down. When you add in all the things that she has said in the past about Total Biscuit and the way that she has interacted with other people in the past, I'm very, 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 very ready to believe that this was just the straw that broke the proverbial camel's back. I think they had their eyes on her for quite a while based off of her behavior, and it became very obvious very quickly that the community was very much opposed to her behaving in this way. It was a very bad reflection on ArenaNet and the game, and so they sided with the community. The gamers, the consumers, the customers. And the community, again, seems to think that ArenaNet made the right call because of how upvoted and how positive the response was to her firing. Reddit threads, Guild Wars, official forum comments, YouTube videos, and commentators. You really, really would have to go out of your way to not see how the community treated this as a positive thing.
And then she had a coworker that was defending her, and ArenaNet was like, you're out of here.
Absolutely. There was also somebody who was fired alongside of Jessica Price, Peter Fries. And he was fired for the exact same reason that Jessica Price was. He was being derogatory and insulting to members of the Guild Wars community. He was effectively making ArenaNet look bad to their consumer base, and he was let go just like she was. He wasn't fired because he tipped his fedora too hard. He was fired because of the way that he acted towards the community, just as Jessica Price had done. He was essentially saying that any feedback that she got was not warranted, wasn't asked for, and shouldn't have been made. He made the ridiculous argument that these are private social media accounts. Even though social media is generally inherently public, the accounts were not protected or locked. They were set to their public function, and it was somebody talking about a game that they were working on that many, many, many thousands of people play. Peter, much like Jessica, somehow was under the impression that if they go to Twitter, a public space, pretty much, with public profiles, and they talk about a game that they're working on, talking out loud to people that follow them because of their involvement with the game, of course people will give their feedback. I mean, the fact that that would even need to be explained is ridiculous.
Yeah, again, like escalating it even further. Like now people are getting fired over like a Twitter back and forth.
Yeah, and also, but you're right. I don't think we know the whole. Like we could possibly not know everything. Maybe.
Yeah, I think the No is pretty much famous at this point for not knowing things.
This was the last straw. Maybe she just snapped at people before and we don't know about it.
Right.
Like maybe it was like, hey, don't do this again or you're fired, and you got fired.
Well, she has had at least one incident previously, specifically on social media, and it was recent. It was after Total Biscuit passed away. She was, let me see if I can find this here. Background, yes. When Total Biscuit passed away, she did post a tweet that said, "The kindest thing I can say is I'm glad he's no longer around to keep doing harm."
Dude, that is
Which, honestly, if I may, seems like a more offensive tweet than
celebrating
saying
someone's
that
death.
you've been mansplained to.
Yeah, celebrating someone's death is like real not cool.
Can't speak ill of the dead. That's not
You know, and that's recent. So I can see potentially as well the community already having a chip on their shoulder about her based on that.
Hair trigger, like ready to jump on anything, yeah.
Yes, again, optics are very important in the way that people perceive your company and the company's employees. They're important. Now, it obviously doesn't mean that ArenaNet feels the same way, obviously. But people see that and they go, It does put the thought into people's heads. And it does definitely show the world that she's just a nasty, terrible person. It does put eyes on her. Right,
and so, you know, because that same thing goes both ways, right? Like, it can be, maybe that had built up.
I will say I think many of us here have tweeted at people and like fired back on internet comments. But I think if any one of us were to get on the internet and celebrate someone's death, we probably wouldn't keep our jobs.
And I think that a lot of companies would be the same way, especially if you have an emphasis on having an internet presence and something that people can look at. Now we get into the question of, are you allowed to celebrate any death? Are you allowed to celebrate the death of a dictator? Are you allowed to celebrate the death of a street thug who was killed by the police? Are you allowed to celebrate the death of a political figure in the United States who is maybe controversial? Where do you draw that line? Well, there isn't a bold red space that you can't cross over. It's definitely something that every company will decide, and it's something that ultimately is kind of determined by public opinion. I don't know how much I like that. And it's questions like these which remind me of why, like I said earlier, I'm generally not someone who leans towards the fire them aspect. But in Jessica Price's case, especially, sometimes there's just clearly a line that is being crossed. Though another aspect of it is also, maybe you have an opinion that some find offensive, but is it directed towards the consumers? Is it directed towards the people who are keeping the company afloat? I think that has an aspect to play as well.
Or would be on very thin ice.
Yeah.
And so that's a pretty reasonable assumption that that's maybe where she was.
Right. So, but based on how recent that was and how quickly the firing announcement came out after this whole escalation and community response, makes me think that it may have been potentially a strike like a strike 3, or
Sure.
maybe they have a strike 2 policy, and that was the first one. And they were like, look, we're done.
Yeah.
We're done.
What do you?
And I think that another thing to consider, because she was fired so quickly, she was fired the day after all of these comments with Dror came out. I think something to keep in mind, knowing that, is it really goes to show just how up in arms the community got and how upset the Guild Wars 2 community was as a reaction to how Jessica Price was behaving. There was clearly a great deal of unhappy people who were very loud and very vocal about their opinion towards Jessica. And it was impossible to miss. It was just not possible for the people in charge and the upper echelons of ArenaNet management to ignore. She effectively made herself an enemy of the community, and that is not the kind of person that companies are really willing to have on their payroll.
What do you think about her coworker that got fired though?
That one is kind of a mystery to some degree. So
Some of the
basically,
players don't even get that. Like, I was on the subreddit the day after of Guild Wars 2, and they were like, we didn't. Even some were like, yeah, we're fine with her going, but we didn't want him to lose his job.
Maybe,
Yeah,
maybe
so-
this was something that like ArenaNet thought this was such an inflammatory situation. that they
Or-
wanted to,
My- my-
another theory. So here's what
quarantine- okay.
his defense of her was saying that basically she never asked for Dror's feedback. Like, hey, dude, she didn't ask you for your expertise, and that was about the level of contribution. But then,
When it comes to Peter Fries, I'm definitely under the impression that there's some things that we simply don't know about the situation. However, I did go to this subreddit for Guild Wars 2. I read the comments and tried to get the player base's thoughts on his firing. Indeed, there's definitely much less support for the firing of Peter Fries. However, at the same time, there seems to be a great deal of understanding as to why it happened at all. After all, the first comment on the subreddit says, "I'm willing to bet there's more that went on behind the scenes that led to his termination beyond just what was publicly expressed on Twitter." And this seems like it's a really likely outcome considering that Peter had been with the company for 13 years. A following commenter brings up the point that if they had not fired him, then Jessica Price would have immediately called her lawyer for a sexism firing, and that he was doomed the minute he commented. The general geist that I'm getting from the subreddit is that people seem to, for the most part, agree that he got himself involved, and his attempt to defend her didn't need to resort to him attacking the same rando asshats that Jessica Price did. Because he didn't just defend Jessica Price, he defended her by attacking members of the community. He didn't accidentally get involved with the situation, he made the conscious decision to join Price in her idiocy. As Crescent Dusk says on the subreddit, he pretty much piled on Dror after Jessica Price already shit-talked him and intentionally misrepresented Dror as some entitled sexist. When you enable horrible people, I don't feel sympathy for you. His response to Dror was full of shit, and he actually doubled down on it when called out. So, all this being said, I think that the moral of the story is that if there ever was a shitty hill to die on, it's the hill of toxic feminists that you work with. I don't know enough personally to really have a strong opinion either way, though it really does look like that ArenaNet was put into a pretty difficult place here.
Are you gonna lose your,
ArenaNet did announce that
you
he
gonna
was
lose
fired
your
as
job
well.
over that? Like, that's just, I don't know. I also, like, I do stand-up. I come from a stand-up background, too. And, like, if somebody fucks with you live, like at a show, like you get heckled, you go full on to that person and, like, shut them down verbally, like, however you can, because you have to take back control from that
There's a
person.
line to not cross.
Exactly.
Michael
You don't
Richards.
cross that line. But if you did that on Twitter, this is what happens.
Right.
You know, and it's like you have to be very different on Twitter as opposed to like a live show. But I still, you know, have that sort of stand-up mentality to a heckler. Like, nope, I mean, I'm gonna top you right now, like as meanly and as viciously as I can.
You
to
saying that
get you
gives
to
me
shut
so
up.
much anxiety, dude.
Wow, that is a fucking awful comparison to make between I'm on a stage doing stand-up and I'm barking down a heckler and what Durar said to Jessica Price. I don't even know how the comparison could possibly be made. They're completely different scenarios. There is a completely different culture that surrounds a live comedy club, and between somebody who is representing a company, a large company who's making products that are purchased by people and that require some level of communication between those making the game and those playing the game. And the comparison between Durar and a heckler is really, that is out there, man. Though I can see why you call yourself a stand-up comedian, because this whole point is a joke. If you're working for a company and you treat every single person who offers you respectful and polite criticism as a heckler that needs to be shot down, yeah, you give that a shot, buddy, and you tell me how that works out for you.
But I think that my other thing, getting back to Guild Wars, is that game can't have a very large community. Like
I think you're wrong.
You know, I mean, maybe
I think
I'm
it's a
wrong.
successful game.
Successful, yes, but it's also
Comparatively,
it's a little bit
I guess.
older. The people who are playing it now is probably a more insular community, in that the people that are playing it have probably are more likely to have been playing it for a very long time.
Sure.
And
And
MMOs have hardcore.
they're lifers, right?
I don't really understand what real point this has when it comes to how somebody with a company engages with a community like this, though ArenaNet doesn't make positive statements in terms of numbers as to whatever the Guild Wars 2 population is. So I had to do a little bit of digging. I went to Google and I checked out some threads and I looked at a few publications that took guesses and extrapolated based on this, that, and the other thing, and there seems to be a pretty healthy population that's playing Guild Wars 2. Either way, whether they're a very insular community or a very casual, touristy kind of community, that doesn't change how you should interact with them in terms of just not being a fucking asshole to people who are offering criticism.
I don't like brigading, and I think this was an overreaction, but there is a lot of passion in MMO communities.
Totally. I think I don't by any means think that guy should have got fired for his you shouldn't have responded comment, but like I kind of think that if you're posting in a public forum, expect responses.
Yes, it's crazy how this needs to be said, but if you're going to go out and make public statements from a public account on social media, which is inherently public, then you're going to have to expect people will respond to it. And not everybody will respond in complete agreement.
So it's a whole big mess, but at the moment, Jessica Price has been fired, and a lot of game developers and people within the industry have come out on her side, saying that they feel it was wrong that she was fired, that it's going to empower toxicity within gaming communities, empower, encourage future brigading.
Yeah.
No, that's not the reason. That's the excuse. That is the excuse that they are giving. The reason that the collective games journalist publications are circling the proverbial wagons in their attempt to defend Jessica Price's disgusting behavior is because Jessica Price is a right proper card-carrying party member. Jessica Price is a toxic, active, vocal feminist. She is a social justice warrior. She is far-left, anti-Trump, pro-diversity. She's part of the in-group. She's in the cult. She's one of the fold. And she has to be protected because of that. If Jessica Price was a pro-Trump, right-leaning, conservative, Christian, free speech advocate, low immigration supporter, then there is no way in hell games journalism would be about protecting her. Because Jessica Price, as we know her, is one of them. Because she agrees, ideologically, with the vast majority of games journalism. Jessica Price is a woman, and a feminist woman, which means that she has to be protected. If Jessica Price had been a conservative, as I said, not only would they not come to her defense, but there would be a dozen articles written within the week talking about how good it was for ArenaNet to fire this toxic, hateful, offensive individual, and that she should have no place in our industry, and that we strive to make gaming and game development a more inclusive and welcoming place for all people. That is why games journalism has come to her defense. Not because they're afraid of brigading, though in a way I think they are, because they know that a vast swath of their readership is not putting up with this SJW bullshit, at least not like they used to. Games journalism, and this isn't new, but games journalism doesn't want the power of these decisions to be placed within the hands of the consumers. They don't want to see that, because the consumers are not like the games journalists. We just want to play good games. We don't want to have politics and ideology shoved down our throats in the media that we consume. We just want to play good games, and we want that our game journalists to be held to a level of integrity. And that is in direct opposition to what the games journalist would want. The Jessica Price firing was a very open and direct and obvious example of how you have to be in some way beholden to the people who pay the bills. You have to be respectful of those who are voting with their wallets. And as we see game publications slowly but surely dying off in the traditional sense, this does worry them. And don't give me that bullshit about how her firing empowers toxicity. If anything, the firing of Jessica Price is a huge blow against toxicity because that's the reason she was let go.
There was one example that was pointed to. This was posted in the subreddit after the firing. Is someone posted, we can probably fire anyone on the Guild Wars 2 dev team as long as we make a big enough stink. Nobody at ArenaNet is safe from the hand of Reddit. We're literally running the company now. They're in fear of the very users they seek to consort with.
That is the most neckbeard comment I've ever heard.
And if the devs, we haven't finished it yet. And if the devs stop communicating, we'll just go at their PR person and cut them down. We actually play the game more than they'll ever be able to. So as a community, we probably know how to do their jobs better. We just don't have the mechanical skill they do. The moment a dev steps out of line or try to talk back to a player, guess what? They'll know we got their hands on their throat and we can squeeze anytime we like. No. Talk shit, stop smiling, do a bad job, lose your job. That's how it works at my dad's restaurant. A job isn't a right, it's an offer, and it can be rescinded at the drop of a hat.
Oh my God, he said that all wearing a Guy Fawkes mask. Jesus.
So listen. I want to be very, very clear. This quote is not representative of the entire community.
Yes.
But it is the kind of thing that people feel comfortable publicly posting in this aftermath. They do feel almost empowered by it, and so that's a concern that a lot of developers have is...
So I let that clip play for a while because I think it's important that you hear the whole thing. I wanted you to understand just what it is that these people are reacting to. Because what Ashley just read was a troll post that was posted by a admitted Price supporter who posted it there to make the subreddit look bad. Whatever Ashley is reading this post off of, she apparently didn't notice that the vote was negatively downvoted. Which is strange because Ashley says this is not representative at all of what the Guild Wars community is about or supports, yet you were more than happy to find this one comment that people really didn't like as an example of something that people are afraid of. You can go to any subreddit on any subject at any time, any place underneath the sun and find some weird, outlandish, over-the-top, hyperbolic, inflammatory statement made by some anonymous Reddit poster, and you can prop that up on a pedestal if you want as your magic example of how bad gamers are. But all that does is make you look worse when people like me and those on Reddit find it and expose you, and show the world your immense dishonesty.
Now people think that brigading someone will work, and if we don't like a thing that someone says, or if they talk shit or stop smiling, that they deserve
that's
to
a
lose their job
shitty
over it.
gendered comment right there. That stop smiling, because that gets to like, you should smile
I don't know
more.
that that's, I mean,
Wait,
yeah, I can see
what is
that, but I'm thinking of it more as almost like a service industry.
Oh, okay.
Man, the knee-jerk jump to sexism. Keep your fedora on, pal.
You know, you're like...
He literally did reference the restaurant.
His dad's
to that.
restaurant.
But also that makes me think this guy's like 14. It's like, my dad has a restaurant and we control Guild Wars.
Let's settle down, please.
I do think that Arena, like, obviously we can't speak to the whole reason she was fired, but if this was the whole reason she was fired, totally disagree
That
with
seems
that.
like an overreaction
Totally
for
disagree
sure.
with it, yeah.
If this was the only thing that they were weighing,
Yeah.
I think it's an overreaction. I think that she could have responded more, more politically sensitively, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think that
I think that Jessica Price was fired for a very legitimate reason. And even if this was the only thing that she had done, her behavior that was so outright toxic towards some member of the community who was an ArenaNet partner was completely unjustified in every sense of the word. And your attempts to downplay the way that she's behaving towards a consumer of somebody who supports her and who supports the product that she works on is baffling to me. How quickly you guys are willing to try and downplay as much as you can her behavior, while at the same time trying to insinuate that Duror's behavior was the one who had the malicious motives behind it.
I think she probably wouldn't have gotten in trouble if she didn't bring gender into it, because gender wasn't brought up until she brought it up. And
It wasn't said specifically.
Pretty sure it was Jessica who specifically brought it up, Ashley.
That said, looking at some of the responses from the YouTuber, Duror, I don't know if these are gendered. Like I said, I've only got my own experience. And I
Right.
can't weigh it against having a male experience because I have never had one, so I don't know if it would have been similar. There are a lot of very dismissive things in his comments, very sort of passive aggressive, very acknowledgement of your thing. However, and nevertheless is, and sort of dismissing
Right,
a
and
lot of
that
things
is-
she has
that
to
is-
say, and that's where I don't know.
And that's the problem, is that, like, yes, you could say that he's being dismissive and he's trying to tell you how to do your job, 100%. But like, unless you have a really good case for why you think this is being based upon gender, like
It's an assumed thing.
right,
until-
and it's right. Like, you shouldn't. I don't feel like it's like a fair thing to say. Like,
Yeah, I know, another longer clip, but I think that whole thing by itself was something that was worth hearing. Basically, what Ashley starts off by saying is, first off, the idea that Duror was being dismissive and passive-aggressive, which I don't believe at all that he was. I think he was just being polite and earnest, and that makes people upset for whatever reason because they're looking for dirt, and when there isn't any, they'll invent it. They'll look between the lines. Ashley, I don't care if you don't have a male perspective. I don't care if you have a female perspective. Literally irrelevant to this. You have to read things as they are. You can't be looking for intentions that don't necessarily exist. It's a witch hunt of sort. Nothing that Duror said had anything to do with gender. Nothing that Duror said had anything to do with the fact that he was a man and Jessica Price was a woman. Nothing in any of that conversation on his side had anything to do with that. And you trying to reach and stretch to try and desperately come up with some kind of a reason to make that the case is pathetic. Because again, you're doing everything that you can to downplay what Jessica Price said, and at the same time, you are digging so hard to try and make something that Duror set out to be sexist underneath the surface. It's really pathetic. And quite frankly, I have no idea how you haven't learned from this. What I think is very interesting, though, is that Adam here was the exact same person who, in a previous video that I made, was knee-jerk, bam, just like that, ready to call Warhorse Studios racist because they didn't have minorities in a game that took place in 1403 Bohemia. He was right on that accusation of racism. He was there. He was ready for it. Boom. There can't be any other explanation. They have to be racist. They hadn't done anything racist. They hadn't said anything racist. But he was ready to call him racist at the drop of a hat. And yet now we see from Adam, interestingly, a much more tempered outlook of the situation. One where he's saying, maybe we shouldn't assume it, and unless it's actually there, we shouldn't call it out as something. So I wonder if maybe Adam learned his lesson. And if that's the case, then good on you, Adam. Good on you, Adam. Honestly, it's very good to see you taking this outlook to the situation after how you've behaved previously.
You hate me because of the gender I am, and that's the only reason you're acting this way.
So I actually found a response from Mike O'Brien, the president of ArenaNet.
Great.
That he responded to Polygon in an article where he said, concerns have been publicly raised that she was responding to harassment. It's not my place to tell employees when they should or shouldn't feel harassed. In this case, however, our employees could have chosen not to engage. They could have brought the issue to the company, whereby we would have done everything we could have to protect them. We won't tolerate harassment. When an employee feels harassed, we want them to bring the issue to us so that we can protect the employee, deal with the issue, and use it to speak to the larger issue of harassment. Whatever Jessica and Peter felt internally about the situation, this was objectively a customer engaging us respectfully and professionally, presenting a suggestion from our game. Any response from our company needed to be respectful and professional. A perceived slight doesn't give us a license to attack. The tweets were made on July 4th when the studio was closed for the holiday. We were aware of them that day and decided we'd need to take action in the morning. The fact that the community's anger was escalating on July 5th made it look like our action was in response to the community's anger. That wasn't the case. We took action as soon as we practically could.
Well, that seems pretty reasonable to me.
I mean, and that I don't agree with like firing over responding, even if it was like an inflammatory response.
So from their perspective, it's not, this was one of our employees being rude to a customer.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
those are their words, not mine.
And I think that's a little crazy.
A little crazy, Adam. How? Of course she was being rude to a customer. How do you possibly look at the way that she was behaving and say, nah, she wasn't being rude to a customer? Fuck off, Adam. It's like, in what universe is calling somebody a rando asshat not being rude? In what universe is falsely calling people sexist for no reason not being rude? Shit, fuck, you people don't think a woman feminist can do anything wrong, do you?
Also, this is why people are so guarded in public, and people want to learn more people want to hear more from devs and learn more about game making in the process. This is why people are guarded, and they don't say more because they don't want to invite situations like this where things just escalate and go nuclear within a few hours.
I don't think this is a very good example of that scenario because Jessica brought this upon herself 100%. She was the aggressor. She was the one who brought up the sexism. She was completely out of line. Jessica has nobody to blame but herself, despite her in all the weeks prior continuing to blame the patriarchy, the attitude against women, yada yada yada.
Right, or even not even necessarily invite, but they don't want to risk.
Right. Run the
Yeah,
absolutely.
If they actually respond to someone, they
Right.
could lose their jobs.
Right.
You know, and you know, granted, most people probably wouldn't respond with the level of exasperation, but you know,
Nobody in their right minds thinks that this is an example of somebody losing their job because they just responded to somebody. This is clearly an example of somebody treating their customers like shit, openly calling them sexist for no reason at all, and that's what got it done. You painting this as an example of, oh, she was just fired because she just responded is completely disingenuous. But you know what, Ashley, at this point, I've basically come to expect that from you, so I'm not at all surprised.
I don't read her initial response as being mad so much as like, come on.
Yeah.
Which is,
Yeah.
you know, I feel like that's a less extreme reaction than like, how dare you?
I'm not saying it couldn't have been handled differently because it definitely could have.
Yeah, but it also, reading mood on internet can be difficult.
Yes.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, so overall, kind of a crazy thing that the Guild Wars 2 community has been going through.
I can't wait to play it. Check it out.
Well, why wouldn't you? If anything, the Guild Wars 2 community was the most level-headed about this entire affair. Besides, I thought you guys over there at the Know were really big on getting rid of sexism in the communities around gaming. So, why aren't you applauding her firing? I, however, think I'm going to call it there. I think I've about exhausted what I feel like I need to from this episode of Glitch Please, and I'm looking forward in the future to all of their wonderful social commentary to come. Consider me back on YouTube, though. It's good to be back after this long hiatus. So if you guys liked what you heard, please feel free to chuck me some dosh on Patreon to help me keep this going. And stay tuned for a live stream that I'll be doing shortly after this. I'm going to be looking at some of the articles revolving around the firing and the takes that game journalist publications are making on the whole schmagaggle. Again, if you're looking for headsets, please really check out the ones that I linked you earlier, the K7XXs. They sent me one, and they really were good. I really do like them, and I think that a lot of people out there will like them as well. I like to recommend good products to people. It gives people more confidence, in my opinion. I think it builds up a level of trust, and if I see something that works really well for me, then I want other people to get it as well. I want to reward good products with good business. So until I see you soon, all of you guys have an excellent day. It is 3:37 in the morning and I have finished this video. Yeah, boy, it's time to take a piss.